Welcome to The Beat. I'm Jason Johnson in for Ari Melber. We start with a political development that could throw midterm campaigns into chaos, rattle Republican candidates, and put new heat on the MAGA movement. Elon Musk today saying when his purchase of Twitter is finalized, he will reinstate Donald Trump's account. Trump was permanently banned from the platform after the January 6th insurrection for inciting violence. Musk said this earlier.
I do think that it was not correct to ban Donald Trump. I think that was a mistake because it alienated a large part of the country and did not ultimately result in Donald Trump not having a voice. I would reverse the perma-ban. I think it was a morally bad decision, to be clear, and foolish in the extreme.
Yeah, so a few things. First, Musk's purchase is expected to go through sometime this year. He doesn't take over the platform until then, but it's unclear if that will be before or after the midterms. Second, Donald Trump claims he won't rejoin Twitter, but nobody believes what Donald Trump says anyway. And third, this is unfortunately a big deal. Trump has been starved of that online narcotic since getting banned on major platforms. And while it'd be nice to think he spent the last year in attention rehab, I'd say no, no, no. Republican insiders are reportedly worried that Trump returning to Twitter would damage the party. Trump would go on a revenge tour against anyone who wasn't loyal to him during his Twitter hiatus, and they'd be stuck having to answer for him again on a daily basis. Bigger picture. The landscape is changing fast. It's rapidly dawning on conservatives that their wildly unpopular attacks on women's rights and the likely overturning of Roe could hurt the GOP in the midterms. Fox's Hannity trying to spin it, but you can pretty much read between the lines here.
Democrats need a good distraction for the midterms, a way to drive out turnout and excite their base, and their radical base is lapping it up, and I fear this can go from bad to worse.
Yeah, he's stumbling through that one. Republicans know most Americans do not support this extreme anti-abortion agenda, but the MAGA base does, and the GOP can't control its most extreme elements on this or any front. Think about the big lie. Trump-endorsed election deniers are running in Nebraska and West Virginia primaries tonight. President Joe Biden eyeing an opportunity for Democrats to take back 4 seats in the Senate. But Democrats have work to do, at least on the Senate side. They're still unwilling to break through McConnell's obstruction by using the filibuster. Tomorrow, they'll hold a Senate vote to protect abortion rights. That vote will fail. Speaker Pelosi is blaming the Republicans.
I want the Republican Party to take back the party. Take it back to where you were, where you cared about a woman's right to choose, and you cared about the environment, and all. Here I am, Nancy Pelosi, saying this country needs a strong Republican Party, and we do. Not a cult, but a strong Republican Party.
Seems pretty strong that a minority party can overthrow popular will. That's where we start tonight. Speaker Pelosi talking about the GOP's cult as the cult leader looks to regain his megaphone. Joining me now is editor-at-large for The Bulwark, Charlie Sykes. Also with us, journalist and host of the podcast Gaslit Nation, You Should Be Listening, Sarah Kendzior, and political scientist and dean of the Clinton School of Public Service and my former classmate, Victoria DeFrancesco Soto. Really excited about this group tonight. I'm going to start with this. I have to mention, Donald Trump getting back on Twitter doesn't immediately concern me, because ultimately I think it's up to the press to not give him as much attention as he desperately needs. But Charlie, I got to ask you, if Trump gets back on Twitter before the midterms, let's say August, right? Elon's in charge, Trump gets back on. What do you think that potentially does to the Republican Party, if anything?
Well, there's a reason why Republicans are nervous, because they spent years pretending that they didn't read Donald Trump's tweets. Remember all of that? Because, in fact, when he tweets something out, they will be asked about it, as they should be asked about it. So this is something that they don't necessarily want. But, I have mixed feelings about this. I think it was I disagree with Elon Musk. I think it was a morally correct decision to kick him off when he was fomenting violence. On the other hand, look, if he's running for president in 2024 and he may be the front runner to get back into office, we need to pay attention. We need to watch him. We need to have a spotlight on him. And so when he's back on Twitter, there's going to be a spotlight on him, which is why Republicans are so upset about this, because he says bat crap crazy stuff all the time. And it's not getting the kind of attention that it used to get. Now it's going to be out there front and center, and they're going to have to answer to it and talk about it, which they don't want to do.
Victoria, I want to play you some sound from Musk himself. This is his sort of tortured logic on free speech. I want your thoughts about this and how it's being used by the far right in America right after we play this clip.
Even after he egged on the crowd who went to the US Capitol, some of them carrying nooses, you still think it was a mistake to remove him?
I think if there are tweets that are wrong, they should, and bad, those should be either deleted or made invisible. And a suspension, a temporary suspension is appropriate, but not a permanent ban.
So he's a free speech absolutist, but the bad speeches, the bad tweets should be deleted. I mean, this kind of word salad, I guess you can do that when you're the richest person on the planet. But Vicky, from like a consistency standpoint, what does this say about what Twitter might look like under sort of the Elon Musk regime?
There's zero consistency, Jason, right? And there's a big question mark in terms of what that regime is going to look like. But I'm going to take a step back and nerd out on you a little bit, because I know that an area that's near and dear to you is media literacy. And I think, to me, Donald Trump coming back on Twitter, is that worrisome? Yes. Are we going to see falsehoods propagated? Yes. But how is it that we can't separate fact from fiction, and that we've seen over the last number of years, study after study showing that more and more Americans get their news from social media, which is fine, but that the ones that only rely on it are the least knowledgeable, that our young folks are the ones that most rely on social media. So we have this complete lack of media literacy, which doesn't allow us to sift through what people are saying, right? Free speech. Say what you want to say, even if it's crazy, even if it's a lie, but there's no base for us to understand this. And for me, this is what worries me tremendously.
So I want to switch gears slightly. Sarah, who is one of my favorite follows on Twitter, I want to put a larger context of how we're looking at these next couple of months, Twitter, the midterm elections. As of right now, we have the Republicans last week. They got the Supreme Court they wanted. It looks like they're about to strip abortion rights. And we have the White House pretty much releasing a statement saying, hey, people, you can protest at Kavanaugh's house, but don't be too aggressive about it. You have the Democrats already saying, look, we're not going to be able to do anything about this in the Senate. You have James Clyburn going down and campaigning for the lone pro-life Democrat in the House of Representatives right now. I'm looking at this and thinking, is it unreasonable to think that the Democratic Party, at least its leadership, maybe they're not as passionate about this as the voters want them to be? Maybe they are really a centrist party and not a left-wing party, because I don't see nearly as much passion and concern about abortion rights as I hear from the regular people in the streets. What's your thought on that?
I think that's true, and it follows their lack of concern about the attempted overthrow of the country in January, the lack of follow through on that. I think we have a party of out-of-touch elites, septuagenarians, octogenarians. They don't know how ordinary people live, and they don't care how ordinary people die. And I'm sorry to put it in such stark terms, and I certainly don't think it applies to everyone in the Democratic Party, but it is true of the leadership. People are scared. Women are scared. People in states like mine, Missouri, which will have a trigger law that will outlaw abortion and then possibly outlaw contraception immediately, are very frightened. And they're not responding to that. They're placing more emphasis on protecting people like Brett Kavanaugh from completely peaceful protests started by his own neighbors than they are on protecting the immediate threat to women, a threat that's already been going on all year to women in Texas and is just going to expand nationwide.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I don't think people realize this is partially Brett Kavanaugh's neighbors. Nobody likes him, okay? Even if your neighbors are setting up protests, I cannot wait to find out what their next homeowners association meeting is like. Charlie, you're in a state where, it's an important potential pickup for the Democratic Party. It seems like it's close, but it seems like the front runner on the Democratic side is Mandela Barnes. You've got Ron Johnson, who's one of the most unpopular and flame-throwing Republican senators that you have. Is this the kind of thing? Is a Trump return and is eliminating abortion rights the kind of thing that would drag Ron Johnson down nationally and drag him down at home? Or do you think the MAGA support in that state, and for a lot of Republicans, it'll be enough to withstand the national headwinds?
It's hard to know. I mean, at this point, with the stock market down, interest rates going up, inflation, those things may drown this out. But this is the one thing that I think might spur Democratic turnout. And in Wisconsin, that's crucial. We have a governor who I think is very, very vulnerable. But the governor's race now becomes a referendum. It becomes very much a binary choice. Like Missouri, we have a trigger law that was written in the 1840s that ban all abortions that might go into effect if Republicans are elected. So this clearly changes the political dynamic dramatically in Wisconsin. But could I just weigh in on all of this? Because I think I'm going to disagree with some of you here. What Democrats have to do if they are genuinely concerned about abortion rights is they have to win elections. And by the way, focusing on protests at the homes of Supreme Court justices is not the way to win hearts and minds. It may scratch an ideological itch, but it in fact is not going to persuade. It's more likely to alienate. And I also disagree with Sarah that the Democrats don't care about this because they passed security measures saying that we, should protect members of the Supreme Court. That seems like basic. I think that my criticism of Chuck Schumer would be, why don't you go after the Republicans on their most vulnerable points? Why not have a vote tomorrow in the United States Senate on questions like, should there be exceptions for rape, incest, the life of the mother? How about saying that there can be no bans on of abortions for ectopic pregnancies? Make the Republicans go on record supporting some of these no exception laws that exist in places like Missouri and Wisconsin. That would be, if it's a messaging law, if it's a messaging bill, then why not have a message that highlights the real vulnerabilities as opposed to going through this ritual, which will just be futile and will frustrate activists in the Democratic base?
Sarah, I want you to get a chance to respond to Charlie, but I also want to add something here. This idea that the Democrats actually care about it. In my mind, and in the minds, I think, of a lot of voters out there, it looks like the Democrats in the Senate were very quick to act on defending members of the Supreme Court who just snatched away the rights of hundreds of thousands of people, but they're not nearly as aggressive in defending the rights of the men and women who put them in office. Sarah, I'll give you a chance to respond to Charlie.
Yes, exactly. It's a matter of urgency. It's a matter of what they think is important. And you see the same lack of concern and urgency on issues like voting rights, which we need. Doesn't matter how good your campaigns are. It doesn't matter how good your candidates are. If we don't have voting rights, then you're going to be unable to get the people in office to reverse policies like that. And they haven't moved on that either. I mean, they haven't even restored the postal service. So they've acted with a lack of urgency on a number of issues. I think this one is particularly resonant in the fact that they did manage to get together like some kind of centrist Voltron and assemble a little bill to protect the people who are taking away our rights. Yes, that's not going to sit well with Democratic voters. I don't think it's going to sit well with Americans in general.
It will.
Victoria, I want to mention this. 1 second, Charlie. I want to get to Victoria. I'll get right back to you. Victoria, I also want to add this and your thoughts on this. Both of us, we've all been sort of talking about this idea of turning out and persuasion one way or another. Political scientists, I don't really think anyone's getting persuaded anymore. I think this is an issue of turnout. Do you think that abortion is the kind of issue that will persuade mythical Republican women to vote Democratic, or do you think it's more likely to just turn out what is occasionally a sluggish base of Democrats during the midterms?
I think it's both, right? I think that there is the base. We know that in midterms, typically low propensity voters don't come out. But I think that the issue now that we're seeing is going to push those folks most affected by these restrictions, by these abortion restrictions, namely Black and brown women, to turn out where they may not have otherwise turned out. So I think that's one piece of it. And I do think that there can be some persuasion, but a lot of it is going to depend on the Democratic Party, on Democratic operatives, of how they package it, right? Because it's going to be different how you relate to an independent woman in the suburbs, to a country club Republican woman. So there's going to have to also be a lot of skill involved. You can't just be like, okay, there's overreach. Look at how crazy this is. There has to be the work put in. If it is, I do think there is the potential to see the needle move toward the Democratic Party and perhaps help them maintain the House, or at the very least not see the losses that they were expecting.
Charlie, I'll give you the final word. I know you were chomping at the bit.
No, I'm just saying that, tactics, should be smart. Try to actually win elections. If you're against mob violence when it's the other guy, then you shouldn't encourage any sort of mobs when it is your side. Also, the security of, I guess part of this is the whataboutism, that it is important to say that, we are going to have a vigorous debate about this issue, but some things are off the table. We don't go to the homes where you have justices and their families and their children. I think that offends a lot of Americans. That is not a winning issue. We should not be talking about that. Fox News wants to talk all the time about this issue, about the protest. If you are concerned about this, if you want to win this issue, talk about the overreach, the extreme legislation in places like Louisiana. Talk about what they're trying to do about the abortion bill, about Plan B, about women who have been raped or been the victims of incest. Those are the issues that, in fact, Jason, I do think will persuade people, will turn people off. But embracing any sort of culture of threats may make you feel good, but it is not an effective strategy if you really want, in the end, to make a difference.
I don't know. If you're trying to galvanize people under 25, the idea of Susan Collins calling the cops on people for putting a chalk outline outside her house, I don't know. That's the kind of thing that kids get excited about and vote for. Charlie Sykes, Sarah Kinzior, and Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, thank you all so much for starting us off on the show today.